Imagine someone promising you that you're going to have a gigantic family, when you're already at the age of asking for a discount on medication. That's the story. And yes, everything about it seemed impossible. Abraham lived quietly. Stable routine, predictable days, plans already set. Nothing dramatic, nothing risky. Just a man enjoying the calm stage of life where the biggest surprise should be a new wrinkle. Then comes the least rational promise he has ever heard. He would become the father of a huge family. So huge it could only be compared to the stars in the sky. He reacts exactly like anyone would. He looks at his age. He looks at Sarah's age. He looks at the sky. Silence. Absolute silence. The promise made no sense biologically, socially, or mathematically. But it also came with a bonus challenge. Leave home. Drop everything. Move to another land and wait for something he couldn't see. No timeline, no map, no explanation, just go. The ancient version of someone saying, pack your bags, trust the process. In modern terms, it was like someone guaranteeing you'll become an influencer after 90. And yet, Abraham believes. He doesn't argue, bargain, or ask for a detailed plan. He doesn't request a sign. He simply accepts the idea that this impossibly large promise is somehow his future, a choice that would confuse anyone watching from the sidelines. He begins preparing quietly. He talks to Sarah. He organizes the household. He gets everything ready for a journey he can't logically defend. There's an almost comedic tone to the scene. An older couple packing for a future no one else can imagine, surrounded by neighbors giving them that universal, "Are you sure?" look. Still, Abraham moves. The promise involves leaving his home, letting go of everything familiar, changing countries, and following an invisible future. A lottery-level life plan. But something in him remains steady. He takes a breath, gathers his things, and steps toward the unknown. The entire moment is strangely human. No thunderbolts, no cinematic music. Just an elderly man deciding that an impossible promise is still a promise. He doesn't know when it will happen, how it will happen, or why it was given to him, but he believes enough to move. And this is where the story actually begins, not with the promise itself, but with what he does after hearing it. Because the second he starts walking, everything changes. Abraham carries a future he can't see, heading toward a land he doesn't know, driven by a conviction that doesn't match his circumstances. He doesn't understand the plan. He doesn't need to. For reasons no one understands to this day, Abraham believes. And with that first quiet step into uncertainty, the journey opens into its next phase, where the faith is huge, but the clarity of the plan is zero. Abraham keeps walking, carrying a promise that makes no sense. The faith is huge. The clarity of the plan, zero. He steps into the unknown with nothing but direction. No map, no timeline, no estimated arrival date, just movement. He leaves home without knowing where he's going, and every day becomes a kind of improvisation. Wake up, pack up, walk, repeat. When people ask why, he gives the simplest answer possible. God spoke to me. In modern terms, it was like quitting your job, selling everything and saying, the universe gave me a sign. Sarah tries to keep up, even though none of this fits into her idea of a reasonable plan. Some days she walks in silence, processing everything. Other days she gives Abraham that look that says, "Are you sure this wasn't a dream?" The servants follow along with a mix of loyalty and confusion, whispering among themselves, trying to understand why they're migrating without knowing their destination. And the neighbors, they definitely think it's madness. Watching him leave must have been like watching someone walk into the wilderness with full confidence and zero explanation. Abraham doesn't slow down. He doesn't pause to reconsider. He simply trusts the direction, even though nothing changes around him. The days turn into weeks and the journey becomes the new normal. They stop in one place, pack up, move again. Improvised life, improvised meals, improvised explanations whenever someone asks what exactly he's looking for. There's a dry comedy in the whole situation. Abraham has faith. The rest of the group has doubts, and it makes sense, because the promise doesn't show up, not even a hint. Time keeps moving, but nothing else seems to. Abraham gets older. Sarah gets older. The people around them start quietly wondering how far this promise can stretch before breaking. This, right here, is where the tension builds. Not dramatic tension, but that human, uncomfortable type. The kind that grows quietly as the days pass, and the promised future remains invisible. Every sunrise feels the same. Every step leads to another step. And the question no one says out loud hangs in the air. How long can someone follow a plan that refuses to reveal itself? Abraham doesn't complain, he doesn't panic, he just keeps going. Maybe because stopping would feel like giving up. Maybe because movement is the only proof he has that he still believes. Either way, the trip continues, long after the excitement should have worn off. The story shifts here. It stops being about the promise itself and becomes about endurance. How far someone is willing to walk with nothing visible to hold on to. And that's where it gets quietly intense. Because this is the moment when the story begins to feel uncomfortably real. The days keep passing, the promise keeps delaying, and when a promise takes too long, alternative solutions start showing up. That's when Sarah makes a bold suggestion. Abraham should have a child through another woman. In their culture it worked. It was normal, accepted, even practical. Emotionally, though, it was a guaranteed mess. Abraham listens. He hesitates for a moment, then agrees. It feels like the only logical bridge between the future he was promised and the reality he was living. But the whole plan has the same energy as fixing a serious problem using a sketchy tutorial from the internet. Technically possible, probably a bad idea. And yes, the plan works. A child is born. For a brief moment, it looks like everything is finally moving forward. But inside the household, everything starts falling apart quietly. The atmosphere shifts. The lines between roles blur. The dynamics change overnight. Jealousy slips in first, then tension, then unspoken accusations. Small glances turn into long silences. Conversations get shorter. Every little gesture starts meaning something. Nobody says the word mistake, but the feeling hangs in the air like a shadow. Managing a delayed promise has never been easy. And now the situation flips completely. There are two possible heirs, two mothers, two different expectations pulling the household in opposite directions. Nothing feels stable. Nothing feels simple. Abraham walks through camp noticing how every relationship seems to have a new fracture line. Sarah battles her own conflicting emotions. She initiated the solution, yet feels replaced by it. The other woman, suddenly elevated, doesn't feel secure in this new position either. The servants attempt neutrality, but even they can sense the pressure building under every interaction. It's a quiet kind of chaos, the type that grows underneath polite behavior. No shouting, no dramatic scenes, just tension living in the space between people. Abraham tries to hold everything together, but he's starting to see what shortcuts really do. They don't eliminate the weight of a promise, they just rearrange where the weight lands. And in this house, it lands everywhere. On loyalties, on relationships, on future expectations no one knows how to manage. Nights become longer, days become heavier. Every direction he turns, there's a new layer of complication. And even with a child finally present, something inside him knows this isn't the fulfillment of what he was asked to believe. It feels like progress on paper and confusion in reality. He steps outside one morning, breathing in the quiet, and looks at the horizon the same way he did when the journey first began. Different landscape, same question in his mind. Because despite everything shifting around him, the original promise, the one that started it all, is still invisible. The household is tense, divided, and complicated. Days pass, emotions shift, and no one knows what to expect anymore. And then, right in the middle of this confusion, the impossible finally happens, at a moment when it no longer makes sense. God reaffirms the original promise, the one everyone had quietly stopped expecting. Abraham hears it and laughs. Not a dramatic laugh, just that instinctive, "Are you sure?" kind of laugh that slips out when reality feels too unrealistic to engage with. Sarah, listening from a distance, laughs quietly too. In modern terms, it was the kind of laugh people use when they'd rather laugh than argue with life. And then the story breaks its own logic. Sarah becomes pregnant. Everything shifts, the air changes. The tension that filled the house becomes something else, something no one knows how to name. And eventually, Isaac is born. A baby that shouldn't exist, arriving in a family that wasn't ready, at a time that didn't add up. The improbable becomes real. There's a giant irony in all of this. The promise arrives far too late to make logical sense, but just early enough to fulfill exactly what was said. People gather around the newborn trying to process what they're seeing. Everyone holds him like he's proof that the world doesn't always run on human schedules, and every single person has the same thought loaded behind their smile. Did this really happen? Days pass with the house now revolving around Isaac. The space that once held tension now holds something softer. Not peace exactly, but surprise. Abraham watches the child as if the future suddenly has a shape again. Sarah moves carefully, still amazed at what her own body managed to do at her age. But underneath the joy, a new question forms slowly, like a shadow returning at sunset. Because promises always bring responsibilities, and fulfilled promises bring decision points no one can avoid. The family doesn't magically reset. The other child still exists. The other mother is still there. The expectations haven't disappeared, they've multiplied. The arrival of Isaac doesn't erase the complications created before him. It adds new layers to them. Abraham feels this as he walks through the camp, Isaac in his arms. The smiles around him are real, but so are the questions. Two futures are now possible. Two paths, two stories. And everyone knows that choices will have to be made, even if no one wants to say it out loud yet. He looks at Isaac again, the child of an impossible moment, and realizes that joy and difficulty often travel together. A promise fulfilled doesn't end a story. It changes its direction. And just as the household begins to adjust to the miracle that arrived too late to be logical, but just in time to be real, one truth settles quietly in the background, preparing the way for what comes next. Every fulfilled promise brings difficult decisions. Isaac's arrival changes everything, not by solving every problem, but by shifting the entire story onto new ground. And as the household adjusts to this unexpected miracle, something becomes clear. Abraham's story shows that faith isn't about understanding, it's about continuing. So here's the journey in fast rewind. An impossible promise, a path with no map, human attempts to fill in the gaps, conflicts no one planned, and a fulfillment that arrived late enough to confuse everyone, yet early enough to confirm every word spoken. Looking at the whole thing at once, one simple truth rises to the surface. Not everything worthwhile makes sense at the beginning. Some promises need time, not logic. And if this story were happening today, it would feel exactly like betting on something nobody else sees, until it happens. Abraham's road makes more sense when viewed from the end than from the middle. The mistakes, the delays, the detours, the emotions nobody admitted out loud, all of them were pieces of a journey that looked chaotic up close, but formed a clear line when seen from a distance. That's the part people don't tell you. Abraham's faith wasn't built in perfect moments. It was built in the messy ones, in the errors, in the waiting, in the fear, in the complicated decisions he never asked for, but had to face anyway. Faith didn't grow because everything made sense. It grew because he kept going even when nothing did. He didn't get a neatly organized plan. He didn't get a consistent timeline. He didn't get constant reassurance. What he got was movement, steps, silence, confusion, and eventually the thing he didn't think he'd ever touch, the promise made real. And that's why his story still resonates, not because it's smooth or simple, but because it's painfully human. Everyone has walked through seasons where nothing lines up, nothing is clear, and nothing feels close to happening. Abraham just lived that out loud. He kept going, and things unfolded in their own time. As the chapter of his promise closes and the next stories quietly wait in the background, the message stays the same. Faith isn't meant to follow your logic, it's meant to outlast it. So if you want to know what happens next, how this promise shapes everything that follows, how the next generation handles it, and how the story keeps twisting in ways nobody expects, which one do you want simplified next? Isaac, Jacob, or Joseph?